Ladies and gentlemen, we had another very interesting discussion. It was great to hear from the panelists on the formats, on the challenges, on the prospects for total defense. And a great thanks to Elena for a wonderful moderation of the session. We'll be moving to the next part of our democratic resilience track of the Warsaw Security Forum, where we will which will take us to the South Caucasus and a very important discussion on the global order and democracy. So we're going to reach out more into the geopolitics and the connections that we're looking at, values and the relations between countries. And a lot is happening recently in the South Caucasus, and we're extremely privileged to be able to hear directly from His Excellency Ararat Mirzoyan, who's the foreign minister of Armenia. We just had a chance to talk recently in Yerevan, and I can assure you there are some fascinating things happening in the region. And this will be moderated by Anja Welher-Schock, who's the head of international politics at Der Tagesspiegel in Germany. So please, a great round of applause, and I'd like to welcome Anja on the stage. Please join us.
A warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel this morning, which is entitled Global Order and Democracy, a Map for the South Caucasus. My name is Anja Welher-Schock, and I'm the international editor at the German newspaper Tagesspiegel. And please join me in a warm welcome to our panelists this morning. Ararat Mirzoyan, he is the foreign minister of Armenia. Please join me in giving him a hand and welcoming to this panel. Ararat Mirzoyan has been his country's foreign minister since 2021. From 2018 to 2019, he was the deputy prime minister of his country. He served 2 terms as a member of parliament, and from 2019 to 2021, he was the president of his country's parliament. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll, of course, look specifically at Armenia today, but since we're talking about global order, let's start off with a very current development-related topic. Iran, a neighboring country to Armenia, fired more than 100 rockets on Israel last night. Are you concerned that there will be a regional war, and what would be the implications for your country?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to an interesting discussion. And the very first question was quite a tough one, I should confess. You know, we in Armenia, if you know the general geopolitical situation and the trends and the policies in South Caucasus, we in Armenia, we do our best to achieve peace in our region. And here we see that some other countries in larger neighborhoods strike each other with missiles. Of course, we are concerned. Of course, we cannot encourage or welcome any escalation, and we can only hope that this conflict finds its soonest possible settlement.
Let's zoom in a little bit. The conflict around the Karabakh region has been a driver of conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan for decades, and a little more than a year ago, following the offensive by Azerbaijan, more than 140,000 people were displaced and found refuge in Armenia. How has Armenia managed to take in this massive influx of people?
In terms of only receiving the refugees, the forced displaced population of Nagorno-Karabakh, it was a huge challenge, you know, and I think for any government in the world, it is quite a challenge to receive more than 100,000 refugees in 2-3 days. We did our best to meet the immediate needs of these people, give them shelter, I don't know, food, some things, essential things. And of course, we applied to the assistance of the international community, and we appreciate all the assistance we achieved. Now it is the time for the next stage, I would say. we need to somehow meet their mid-term and longer-term needs. And first of all, here I'm speaking about the housing problem, but also employment and bigger efforts would be needed here. But our policy is that if there is no possibility, no opportunity for these people to go back to their homes, then our policy is to make every possible effort to ensure that these people are integrated into the society of Republic of Armenia, find their job, and build their new homes in our country and stay in Armenia.
And how has this development impacted your government's efforts to democratization in Armenia?
Well, not only this influx of refugees, but the roots of this issue. I mean, the attack of Azerbaijan, and it happened in 2023, but the whole story started in 2020 when a war was launched by Azerbaijan against Nagorno-Karabakh. And then in the course of the war, or during the aftermath, Azerbaijani forces entered and invaded also into the sovereign territories of Republic of Armenia. So this is the whole story. And of course, in this situation, many in Armenia came up with the questions. They start questioning the efficiency of democracy. And, interestingly, the question was like the following. Okay, democracy is probably good internally for the prosperity of the people, etc., but whether democracy is able to ensure our security as well. So after the war, which I spoke about, a serious internal crisis emerged in Republic of Armenia, and to give some solution to this situation, we decided to have snap parliamentary elections. We had snap parliamentary elections in 2021, and democracy was among the main things which was being discussed during the electoral campaign. Well, fortunately, the political party which was lobbying for democracy, my political party, we won the elections and formed the government. So this means that citizens of Armenia supported two things. First of all, peace agenda of the government, and also the further democratization of the country.
How have these developments impacted the population's stance towards Russia? Russia used to hold its hand over Armenia in this conflict, but stood by when the Azerbaijani offensive came last year. Has this pushed Armenians away from Russia, possibly towards Europe?
Very interesting question, and it's not a secret anymore that there is a huge frustration in Armenian society regarding the Russia's assistance and alliance with Russia, because for decades people of Armenia was thinking that if something like this happens, Russia will help us, will protect us, etc., etc. So now people of Armenia saw that this is not the case. We don't get assistance. Moreover, you know that after the war of 2020, Russian peacekeepers were sent to Nagorno-Karabakh to ensure the security of population of Nagorno-Karabakh. And we saw that during this forced displacement, the peacekeeping mission did not work. It did not justify itself. Moreover, we are a formal member of a collective security treaty organization with Russia and other countries. And when we had attacks on our internationally recognized borders, we saw that again, neither Russia nor our formal allies from CSTO, they did not react. At least their reaction was not fitting with our expectations. So, of course, as one can assume, this created huge frustration, and now people in Armenia, they are considering some other options, as I said, and the topic is connected with democracy. So we truly believe in democracy, and understandably this brings us closer to the European Union, to the United States. So in the context of the values of the society, we have been close to the EU, to the Western countries, but in the context of security, psychologically, people of Armenia, they were connecting themselves to the Russia. Now, this second component crashed, and people don't see any other reason why not to fully tie themselves with the European Union, for instance.
Let me come back to that later. I wanted to have a look with you at the peace agreement. Azerbaijan and Armenia have been negotiating for months. It seems to be stuck right now. Can you shed some light on where you stand?
Well, huge work has been done during recent 2-3 years, despite all the challenges, the escalations, attacks on Armenian territory. We, the Armenian side, we have been very constructive during the negotiations. You know, there are good news and bad news here. The good news is that we succeeded, we somehow managed to have some success with the Azerbaijani party. For instance, most recently we adopted the first ever legal document between the two countries. So we adopted the regulation on the joint work of the respective border commissions. So this is these commissions work on the delimitation of the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And in this document, we managed to agree that the basis of the delimitation process should be the Alma-Ata Declaration of 1991, which is quite an achievement. Not to overload you with the details, I would only say that, among other things, Alma-Ata Declaration of 1991 stated that the parties, which are former Soviet Union republics, basically 12 of the 15 Soviet Union republics, they adopted this document. So according to this document, among other things, the republics recognized that the former administrative borders between them as Soviet Socialist republics now become internationally recognized interstate borders. So this means that we have a border with Azerbaijan, and while starting delimiting this border, we have a solid ground, solid basis. This is quite an achievement. But this was the good news. The bad news is that there are some other topics that we are negotiating around. For instance, the more comprehensive document, the peace treaty. So imagine we have a situation when we have an almost completed, finalized text of peace treaty. There is a draft. But we don't sign it. So the Azerbaijani side is reluctant to sign this peace document, peace agreement. For some reasons, I don't know, for some calculations, they come up with new and new preconditions each time, and we see that they don't want to sign the document. So this time they say that there are more things that could be agreed. We believe that there is no single agreement in the world between any two countries which regulates all the aspects, all the spheres of their relations. Meanwhile, we can sign this, a very serious document to start with, and then continue negotiating over remaining issues. So we don't see this political will from Azerbaijani side.
So in November, Baku will host the COP27, the climate conference. Do you think this could be a driver in accelerating the peace process?
I hope so. I hope so, because if you remember, we supported Azerbaijani candidacy for having this COP29 event in Baku. And indeed, I really believe that there is a momentum, there is a real opportunity to close the page of conflict in our region, at least between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and open a new page of era of peace and cooperation. Why not? There, in our corner of the planet. But yeah, the reality is something else.
So many Armenians are still worried about possible threats coming from Azerbaijan. How can you instill a sense of confidence in them that there will be a sustainable peace?
Absolutely. There are serious concerns that Azerbaijan has further military plans regarding Armenia, has further plans regarding Armenia's territories. I can bring an example. Nowadays, Azerbaijani side uses the narrative of Western Azerbaijan, which, you know, basically coincides with almost the whole territory of the Republic of Armenia. They assure us that this is not a territorial claim, but unfortunately the impression is completely different. So you ask how we can, or me as a minister or my government can give confidence. Unfortunately, I cannot give a confidence, but because I am not confident about the peaceful plans of Azerbaijan.
Well, I would say that's a bad point of start for peace negotiations, but let's hope that there will be progress. The EU has been sending a monitoring mission to monitor the border on the Armenian side. What difference has this made?
EU sent a monitoring mission, and interestingly, Azerbaijan did not agree to have the same mission on their side of the border. So this mission monitors the situation only from the Armenian side of the border. And we should confess that since its deployment, there hasn't been any major escalation. So it works, it really works, and we highly appreciate this effort of the European Union. And by the way, speaking about the European Union, if you don't mind, this is not the only tool that now is used to strengthen Armenia's resilience, be it economic resilience, be it, I don't know, political resilience, or to ensure somehow stability in the region. So there are several other tools which are aimed to strengthen Armenia's resilience, as I said, but also to bring EU closer to Armenia and Armenia closer to EU. We just launched the visa liberalization dialogue. We just got the support of the European Union under European Peace Facility, which is, you know, almost an unbelievable thing, having in mind, considering the fact that Armenia is still a formal member of the CSTO. And some other things. We now work over a new comprehensive document, which is entitled a New Partnership Agenda. So more is coming.
Could Armenia fathom...
Many things are happening between Armenia and EU. Yeah.
Okay. Could Armenia fathom leaving the CSTO?
We have frozen our membership. And we don't have any intention to return to those relations that existed before these incidents.
But
we cannot, and we do not see ourselves in an alliance, a military alliance, which does not work. So,
what prevents Armenia from formally leaving the CSTO?
I think all of us should be more careful, and it's not a big secret that stability should be a priority, and the processes which can possibly take place should be well calculated and managed, and also, I mean, the risk management, etc. So it's not a very simple question.
So Armenia has had traditionally extremely difficult relations with Turkey, but there's been a process of normalization. At the end of July, both special envoys met at the shared border. What has been the development?
Yes, special envoys met, but also there are regular meetings and phone conversations between foreign ministers. Also, the President of Turkey and Prime Minister of Armenia meet from time to time. The last meeting between them took place just a few days ago in New York on the margins of UN General Assembly a week. And, you know, the overall atmosphere is quite positive. We have agreed that, and this agreement was reached months ago, or more than a year ago, we have agreed that there is no precondition, either by the Turkish side nor by the Armenian side. We have agreed that the outcome of this process should be the full normalization of relations between Armenia and Turkey. We have agreed that as a first serious step, diplomatic relations should be established between the two countries, but also the border, which has been closed for more than 3 decades, should be open for at least third country citizens and also Armenian and Turkish nationals, so citizens who have diplomatic passports. But we see that this does not happen on the ground. The border is still closed there, and there are no diplomatic relations. Although there have been some positive developments as well, our experts studied and we renovated, reconstructed some infrastructure on the border where the passage should be open. Also now our experts make the same study, and we assume that we will continue these works. We should reconstruct the infrastructure where we have the railway passage, railway gate. But nevertheless, the border is still closed. And interestingly, in the context of Armenian-Turkish dialogue, there is no problem of Armenian-Turkish nature. The only problem is, and our Turkish colleagues say this, the only problem is the non-finalized normalization between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I already mentioned earlier that we are right in the middle of process of bringing Armenia and the European Union closer to each other. I already mentioned that there are several tools and mechanisms that are being discussed right now. We have already had some serious achievements, and some more are being discussed right now. What I can add to this is that many in Armenia now more and more loudly speak about Armenia's membership in the European Union. I can say that people of Armenia, they have European aspirations, but also have questions what would be the European response to these aspirations.
Yes, well, unfortunately, we've neared the end of our discussion. Thank you so much for joining us for this talk. And thank you so much, Minister Ararat Mirzoyan. And please stay tuned for the following panels. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, that was a very, very interesting discussion, and I'm sure we're all delighted to hear insights about so important events happening in the South Caucasus and how a shift is happening in this extremely important geopolitically region. So again, a great many thanks to our special guest, His Excellency the Foreign Minister, and thank you, Anya, for excellent moderation. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have the opportunity to listen to remarks from the partner of the Warsaw Security Forum, a representative of Google, and it's my great pleasure to invite Ms. Heather Adkins, who's a Vice President of Security Engineering at Google, who will deliver her remarks now. Please, Heather, join us on stage.
Heather Adkins, and I'm Vice President of the Office of Cybersecurity Resilience at Google. I've been in cybersecurity for over 25 years, 22 of those at Google. And it has been both an honor and quite an exciting adventure over my long career. I wanted to open today's conversation on AI. We'll have a panel a little bit later. I wanted to open it a little bit by framing the challenges I've seen it over my career. We talk about the defender's dilemma. If you are in a cybersecurity defense job today, it feels like you have to be perfect all the time. Every device must be properly configured, all the software must be updated, and you must work quickly to find and defend against attackers. The attackers, however, have a much easier job. They only have to be right one time, as opposed to all the time. And this asymmetric nature of cybersecurity is what we call the defender's dilemma. And it is largely what we have been trying to solve for in cybersecurity for over 3 decades. I wanted to share a little bit today about this challenge. We'll talk about that, but I also wanted to share my optimism on some things that we are seeing go well and some things we are getting right. And the stakes couldn't be higher. The asymmetrical nature of cybersecurity is the reasons we have headlines like this. It's the reason we are seeing a 300% increase in attacks on NATO this year. It's the reason why ransomware syndicates are taking down hospitals and denying people life-saving care. And it's also the reason why here in Poland, and it's a great honor to be here in Warsaw talking about this topic. It's the reason why here in Poland we see over 1,000 attacks against Polish companies here, making Poland the single highest targeted nation in Europe. And that's extraordinary if we think about that. And in the last 6 months alone, we have seen that increase further 130%. Right? This challenge begins to seem extraordinary. And again, it's part of a much longer trend. But let me talk a little bit about why we are feeling so optimistic. And it comes down to really 2 things. The first is the notion of community. Nations all over the world, as I travel everywhere, have cybersecurity defenders. They have nations and governments that are increasingly aware of the problem. They have NGOs, journalists, citizens on the ground who are all deeply involved in trying to help. Some of the work we've been doing at Google, for example, here in Poland, are around elections. Poland had elections last year. And we were able to engage to train thousands of campaign workers, journalists, and government officials to protect themselves, to turn on our highest level of security we have for our products, and then to share threat intelligence about what we are seeing on the ground during the elections. You see here a graph. This is the number of denial of service attacks against Polish government websites, and you can see there's a big spike on the day of the election. One of the things we've been able to do is use our vast global infrastructure to help absorb these high traffic attacks so that government websites can stay online, so voters can find how to vote, where to vote, and how to engage in their democracy. And this kind of community participation and community outreach and collaboration is one of the reasons why I feel so positive and optimistic about the cybersecurity challenge today. But I also feel very positive because we now have a piece of technology that we've never had before: artificial intelligence. And this probably evokes both a positive response and a little bit of a fear response when you say it. I think a lot of people have mixed feelings. We've been using artificial intelligence for over a decade. This is not new technology. It's not just Google. But for example, if you are a Gmail user or you use Google Workspace, the enterprise version of our product, an AI model behind the scenes is automatically filtering 99.9% of all spam, phishing, and fraud attacks from your inbox, automatically protecting you every day. And you probably don't realize there's a sophisticated model behind that. Similarly, if you're on an Android phone, we scan 200 billion Android apps every day, looking for malicious apps that we can flag and then remove from devices. And again, this is happening automatically behind the scenes. And these are different, but I also want to acknowledge that with new technology comes challenges. And we understand that generative AI in particular can be used to create synthetic content. What you see here is a screen capture of a video from March of 2022. This was posted to Ukrainian websites. In this video, one would appear to see President Zelensky surrendering to Russia. This was not actually President Zelensky. This is a deepfake video. But it's the kind of thing that you can see might undermine faith not only in the administration of President Zelensky, but also in technology. Because if you can create this kind of dangerous content, why would we trust the technology that does so? And so one of the things that we realize we must absolutely do as an industry, and it's not just Google, it's in coalition with partners like Microsoft and OpenAI and others, is we must begin to use this technology in parallel to making sure that it can be trusted. And this means securing AI from the ground up. It means making sure that we can actually empower defenders by making sure they have as much access to AI as the threat actors do. And it means continuing the research on how to keep things safe over the long term. In June of 2023, we created this framework to help the broader community think about the kinds of things we have to do. Each one of these steps has a checklist of things we have to think about as we think about securing artificial intelligence for today and for the future. We call this our SAFE framework, our secure AI framework. But we also have to engage in industry coalitions together to create safer AI. So we've joined the Frontier Model Forum. So if you've heard of an AI company, they are probably part of this forum as they develop their foundational models. We are doing that with safety in mind as a coalition, even though we are competitors. And this is incredibly important so that everybody feels like they can trust the technology we're giving. We've also been working in the academic community to combat deep fakes. So for example, Synth ID is technology that it would allow you to identify a deep fake, allow us to label it so that if you see it online, you as the user, as the receiver of that information can make an informed judgment as to whether or not you trust that content. And again, this is research that's happening in the open and it's happening in collaboration. And finally, we are bringing together coalitions such as the Coalition for Secure AI to help businesses and organizations take the technology and incorporate it safely into their enterprise, so that if they are interested in using this, they know what it's going to take to be privacy preserving, safe in their environment, and also effective. And again, this isn't just Google, it is a coalition. So I want to wrap up here and we're going to switch to the panel, but let me just leave you again with my sense of optimism that even though there are challenges with new technology, as there has been with every new technology we have ever harnessed or invented, it comes also with the stark realization that we must be bold and responsible. And that is happening in coalition with tech partners and with governments all over the world. With that, just thank you so much for a few minutes of your time, and we're going to switch to the panel now. Give us a moment. Thank you.
Heather, thank you for this very insightful presentation. I learned a lot. So welcome everyone to our next panel discussion on the impact of AI on security and the economy. And I would like to welcome three distinguished experts who are on the forefront of AI innovation. And one of them is, again, Ms. Heather Atkins, Vice President of Security Engineering at Google. Bryce Goodman, Chief Strategist for AI and Machine Learning at the U.S. Department of Defense's Defense Innovation Unit. And Piotr Sankowski, Research Group Leader at NCBR Ideas in Poland. Please have a seat. So my first question to all the panelists is, what do you see as the most significant security challenges posed by the integration of AI into critical systems? And how should governments and industries prepare for these challenges? Heather?
Well, I think I just spoke at quite some length about this. I do think that we are going to have to reason carefully about where we place AI and how much we trust it in certain applications. We think this human-on-the-loop principle is very important for artificial intelligence, where we keep humans involved in the decision-making process. And I think by doing that, it really gives us a guiding principle for the next decade as we do this. Yeah.
Bryce?
I mean, I think all of the concerns that were, I would echo. My only, I guess the only place that I would maybe challenge is I think human in the loop is maybe not realistic in all cases, right? There are lots of cases where the whole reason we're introducing AI is because of the speed of decision making that needs to take place. So I think the question is, obviously setting the intent of an AI system must always be done by a human. But there is this question of in some cases we may be operating in a comms denied environment, and the entire point of relying on AI is that it is capable of making autonomous decisions. And then the question becomes, well, what kinds of decisions should we delegate, and what should we reserve, even if that has an impact on our tactical ability?
Yes. So I think so. In general, I have huge hopes that the introduction of AI to organizations will really extremely help them. So I think that I think that there are two challenges, and in a sense, I always think that AI. I mean, there is always a risk that AI is mimicking us, but in some cases it can be better because, when we talk about fairness, so we actually can define fairness for artificial intelligence systems, whether we don't really do this for people. So I think when we actually will be supported by AI in organizations and companies, then I hope that this will lead to more objective and more fair decisions.
Thank you. Bryce, I have a question for you. From a defense perspective, how is AI changing the landscape of national security? And are we adequately prepared for AI-driven threats like autonomous weapons or AI-powered cyber attacks? And what strategies are being developed within the U.S. Department of Defense to counter these threats? And if I may, one last question related to this. What types of solutions to these threats would you ideally like to see coming from the private sector?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen is a challenge to a global world order where 15 years ago there were only a handful of countries in the world that were capable of carrying out precision strikes. And now anybody who has $1,000 and access to some explosives can carry out a drone attack. And the result has been a totally asymmetric, at least from an economic point of view, response, right? I mean, there were cases of launching Patriot missiles, which cost millions, against these multi-$100 drones. And obviously drones is not just AI. So I would say it's also the introduction of dual-use technology onto the battlefield. And AI has been a huge part of that and will continue to be. But that's something that we in the DoD have been grappling with, and my organization, Defense Innovation Unit, exists to try to accelerate the adoption of dual-use technology into the DoD. And we were one of the first groups to, for example, recognize the both threat and capability that consumer drones offered, and now in Ukraine that's very evident. But I think, yeah, there's this challenge to the status quo. And the cost of being able to acquire these incredible capabilities is, in some cases been greatly diminished, and that has implications both for nation states but also for rogue actors, right? So on the what are we doing? So we recently announced Replicator 2 initiative. So the first Replicator initiative has been looking at attritable weapon platforms. So instead of sending exquisite, tens of millions of dollars of platforms into areas looking at much cheaper. And Replicator 2 is looking at countering UAS, so countering unmanned systems. And that's an area that I'm really glad to see that we're taking seriously as a department. We've been trying to work on that at DIE for a very long time through various vendors. But it's always going to be somewhat of a game of cat and mouse, of course.
Thank you so much. Heather, as someone leading security engineering at Google, how do you see the balance between AI-driven innovation and the need for security? And specifically, what role do large tech companies play in ensuring that AI systems remain secure and don't become tools for malicious actors?
Well, the first thing I want to start with is just a reality check of where we're at with AI today. We have AI models to do very specific things. So we've got AlphaGo, plays Go really well. We have models that do protein folding. That's a really specific model, not general purpose. And now we have generative AI, which feels a bit more like a general purpose artificial intelligence engine. And most of us are interacting today with generative AI via chatbot. So we've got Gemini, is the Google model. But actually, the reality is that when fully adopted, when kind of fully matured, it's going to feel a bit more like a calculator, right? There are probably 100 calculators in this room. You've got one in your watch, your phone. Probably the lights have an addition-subtraction module in the code. It's going to feel a little bit like that. AI will be a little part of everything in electronic components, whether it's optimizing the battery on your phone or optimizing the right lighting automatically. So that's really how most of us will experience this generation of artificial intelligence. And so when we think about the balance of security and building the technology, we both have to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves too much, but also putting in the guardrails. And so if you were going to have an automatic light adjustment system, you would probably put a very specific model for that. You wouldn't have a general purpose module, for example. So I think that's one consideration is, do you give it a fully featured or do you give it a specific task? And then the second thing I think we have to carefully balance is how much access to artificial intelligence are threat actors going to have and how much access are defenders going to have. And one thing we have to be quite careful of is regulating too soon or too hard in such a way that cyber defenders are restricted from use, but their adversaries are not. And that's going to be a lot of conversation with regulators, with governments, to make sure that we've got people enabled on the ground. But that's a polarity that we're going to have to navigate.
Thanks, Heather. That's a serious problem to have to tackle. So, Piotr, in Europe, particularly in Poland, how do you see AI influencing economic development, positively and negatively?
It's kind of challenging question today. I have huge hopes that things, actually that we in Poland started to understand how this topic is important and how, how actually that it costs as well. Yes? So actually one needs to invest in AI and that it will give really a lot of benefits in long term. So I think really I'm really hopeful that we can see that kind of change coming, that there is a really lot of, actually public support for it right now. So I'm really hoping that we can excel. And there are several reasons for this. Yeah? So we do have like extreme programmer talent here in Poland. Yeah, so something which, for example, is the case. So I'm not sure anybody heard of this ICPC, ICM-ICPC. So this is kind of ICM is the main IT organization like in worldwide. Whether this competition is international collegiate programming competition, where actually teams of students compete with one another solving programming tasks. And Warsaw University, for example, is the only university that took part in the finals in this competition starting from 1977. Yeah? So no other university in the world did this. Yes? So we really constantly deliver like top quality talent in AI. And I think this will really, in long term as well, flourish and lead to really huge achievements in the systems here in Poland, because like when people leave Poland, they succeed a lot. As you probably heard about OpenAI. So Kuba Pachocki is the chief scientist. So he's alumni of Warsaw, and he's actually one of the guys who took part in these competitions for many years.
That is impressive. Thanks for sharing the statistic with us in the history. So speaking about talent, there is this fear that AI is going to replace a lot of jobs. So what do you think the role of governments should be to try to ensure that there are not significant economic disruptions when this starts to happen? Heather, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I think there is a conception as people think about, oh, automation will replace that job. What we are actually seeing and extrapolating out of the current trend is that the jobs will change, not eliminate. And when I look at just my own field, cyber defenders, especially if you're early career talent, about 30 to 40% of your job is toil, because we've not had good tools. That will shrink, and there'll be more time actually for people to do more interesting parts of the job, but also more valuable parts of the job. And we think that that is probably true across many sectors. A good example is when automatic teller machines were invented. People had thought that perhaps if you worked in a bank, you would no longer have a job. But actually what we found is that the jobs inside the bank changed. Instead of just counting money, you became an advisor on how to invest your money, so for example. And because of that, I think one thing governments can really focus on is skills building. Everywhere I go, I get one question: how do we train our teachers to teach children about the next generation of technology? How do we help workers reskill for the way that their job will change, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, cybersecurity? Everyone who will start to use this technology has to go back to school. We all went back to school about 18 months ago when generative AI came on board. And so I think education policy, training, and talent policy is something that governments can focus on.
That's a great, very positive view, and paints a very important role for the government. Thank you. Bryce, what's your take on this question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think the challenge is the speed at which AI is progressing as compared to earlier technologies, right? And so I agree that over a long enough period, history shows that we tend to get towards some kind of an equilibrium. That doesn't mean that things like wealth concentration and inequity don't increase, but at least from an employment standpoint, we tend to reach an equilibrium. But along the way, there can be dislocations, right? And so, if you look at the history of electricity, it took about 100 years between the introduction of large-scale electric generation to actually electrifying the majority of manufacturing. Or if you look at, telephone switching, you're talking about a decade, right? And in this case, AI technologies, we're talking about things that, I don't know, in my experience, I would have thought would take years happening in months. I think the other thing that's interesting is a lot of people would have predicted that it would be kind of blue-collar jobs that were going to be automated away via, robotics. There's this idea that, surely like lifting a crate doesn't require that much intelligence, so we can just get a machine to do it. Turns out that that's actually way harder, and that it might be a bunch of white-collar jobs, things like, tax accounting, for example, that get automated. So I think that also shows just the unpredictability, which is inherent to any technology that's growing at the rate that AI is.
Thanks, Bryce. Piotr, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. So I will be repeating hope many times today. I hope 5 times. For some reason. But I hope that we indeed will be able to be able to do more with AI. So it's I think it's kind of the picture is way bigger. I mean, the story of development of technology have been, as you said. I mean, it always have been happening that we did not lose the jobs by introducing electricity, steam power, I don't know, petrol engine whatsoever. But and something is important. I mean, we are not kind of ashamed to go by car now instead of going by a horse, because we are kind of can travel faster. I mean, similarly, we are not ashamed to use a bulldozer instead of a shovel, because we can do much more work. I mean, this will again happen with AI, and I mean, we will be able to do more things using artificial intelligence, as well with respect to kind of, you know, boring operations. Maybe even not boring, but challenging tasks. I mean, essentially, this will give us kind of, it will become a tool that will be able to solve many interesting problems. I mean, essentially do much more work, intellectual work that we were able to do. And I don't think we should be ashamed of it. I mean, we should be kind of proud that we created such tools to actually help us with our work.
Thanks, Piotr.
I have a really interesting example of that. We now have a model that can do extrapolation of protein folding. So if you are doing pharmaceutical research, one of the most challenging things is to understand how the pharmaceutical chemical will interact with the bacteria, the virus, or whatever we're targeting, a cancer cell. And that part of the research in the pharmaceutical community might be 5 years, 10 years. We have now extrapolated every possible protein folding combination, and that is in a database. So today, if you are doing pharmaceutical research, that kind of information is now readily available to you, which means we've cut down, you know, something that from an intellectual perspective would have taken a very, very long time to a short amount of time, but it wasn't the important step in the outcome. The important step in the outcome is the development of the therapeutic, the testing, and the rollout, right? So that's just an example of where we might shorten some of the lifetime of things, but not impact jobs. In fact, we might create and enable more scientists to creating better therapeutics over time.
That's impressive. Thanks for sharing this. How do you, I wonder, and that's a question for all the three of you, how do you deal with the data privacy challenge? As we're building these models, we are enthusiastic about the progress that we're making, and we're using vast amounts of data. But the challenge of privacy concerns has been raised on multiple occasions. How do you deal with that in your respective areas?
I feel like I'm the one who's supposed to answer this one.
Yeah, I think so.
I'll give it a start, and I'd be interested to hear from my fellow panelists. I think it's important to remember we're not starting from zero. There are strong privacy principles everywhere in the world already marked down in legislation. So in the EU, I have GDPR. In the United States, we have a kaleidoscope of frameworks for thinking about privacy. So we're not starting from the beginning. Secondly, it's not just privacy. We also have to be respectful of copyrighted content and other kinds of content that might be used to train data. It might be used as an input to a model to get output. And so we have to think end-to-end about the way that software is built and put the privacy principles in each step. Also looking at the regulatory frameworks that govern that. And so, for example, one of the things the Coalition for Secure AI is doing, this is a coalition with Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, Facebook, etc., is to help companies understand how to safely use artificial intelligence. And one of the first playbooks they want to issue is, how do I make sure that my use of the model is privacy preserving in the context I'm using it? So let's say you've incorporated it into a customer support function and your customer's interacting with a chat bot. And I think we're all probably using some version of this now on websites. How does the company make sure that when the customer types in information that is not stored in a way that's a violation of the privacy policy or the law? and also that the customer knows and has transparency around that, right? So I think the foundations for privacy that we have today are very strong and important, and then we build that into new technology. And indeed, that's the intent of these frameworks around the world.
Thanks, Heather. This is reassuring to hear. Bryce?
Okay, so I'm going to take off my DoD hat and put on my philosophy student hat.
Go for it.
And say, so I think one of the challenges that privacy has never really been a super well-defined concept, right? It's always been a reactive concept. We don't have privacy in law until the invention of the photograph in the 19th century. And when you talk about AI and privacy, AI systems are not interested in knowing what I'm doing. They're interested in knowing what I'm doing insofar as I'm representative of a larger group, right? We're looking at aggregate level trends. So this becomes really complicated when you apply things like the GDPR. And we've seen this challenge in biobanks, for example, which are there to collect a lot of genetic information. And the whole point is to allow researchers easy access to these large genetic databases so that they can try to identify genetic traits and predispositions. But that goes up against this principle of informed consent, which says that every time we access somebody's data, we need to obtain informed consent. Well, the only way we could do that is if we continue to keep their data labeled, right? So you have these bizarre paradoxes that emerge when we try to protect privacy. And my personal belief is because we don't totally have a coherent view of what privacy is. And I think machine learning just sort of brings that to the fore.
Do you have a solution for us?
I don't have a quick and easy solution. I mean, there's a philosopher named Helen Nussbaum who writes about contextual integrity, which I think is a really interesting idea that says instead of calling information, private in a categorical sense, we instead always need to look at the context in which it's being used. And I like her because her work has actually been adapted into certain features in tech tools, right? So it's not just totally, white papers that never go anywhere.
Interesting. Thank you. Piotr, I have a different question for you. What types of AI technologies in Poland are you most excited about?
There are some of them. I think something which is happening right now, I mean, we should remember that in order to introduce some technology, we need to have the related industry present and to be very strong and already innovative. And one of those industries which is in Poland and is very kind of innovative is the gaming industry or computer graphics. Yeah, so I think that here we really have a huge potential to actually build up on kind of maybe interdisciplinary teams that will work on using AI in computer graphics. And other things which we certainly should do are related to agriculture and forestry. I mean, this is really, if you have been traveling around Poland, then you will see we'll have a lot of fields and a lot of trees. So we should really try to use AI to actually, manage this these things better, because it's really kind of a huge part of our country.
Thank you, Piotr. So my last question is for all the panelists, and then we'll open it up for a few questions from the audience. Looking ahead in the next 10 to 15 years, or maybe 5 to 10, let's say 5 to 10, because AI is rapidly evolving. What do you see as the key trends in AI that will have the greatest impact on global security and the economy? And you can each pick your favorite examples. Who would like to start?
I can start. So I think it will happen now, maybe 5 to 10 years it's indeed, but some changes will happen again earlier. So it's indeed kind of, so there are some kind of measurements. I did not try to reproduce them, but kind of people are testing the intelligence of those large language models using the Mensa test. And actually, right now, the latest model achieved 120 IQ. So it's super surprising, because this improvement from, say, 80 to 90 IQ did happen in around 1 to 2 years. Yeah, so we can think of it as that the AI graduated from maybe from university already. So we should like the next progress will actually happen super fast. So again, cannot reproduce this test, so we'll see. But it's really, I think, surprising that, or maybe better word, I hope that these tools will actually be used to generate new types of innovation. Yeah, so we should think of AI as a tool to actually try to do more things as well in innovation and technology, like to develop new materials, develop new types of medicines, and use it in medicine. And this will even like combinations like, I don't know, psychiatry and using AI for really mental health issues. I think this will really come, and it will come soon. And I mean, not even mentioning, of course, education and personalized education.
Thanks, Piotr. Bryce?
Yeah, I won't even try to attempt to do 5 or 10 years. I think in the military, what's I think going to be very interesting is seeing AI move out of, or not move out of, but attention shift from what I think are relatively straightforward applications like computer vision and predictive maintenance, and towards far more consequential but in some ways ambiguous tasks like strategic planning, for example, operational planning, where you have this incredibly lengthy process that right now is very rigid and is very much a waterfall process. Having AI, that's where I think you would be able to say we actually have intelligence on tap. And then in the immediate future, I think agentic systems, so AI that doesn't just provide an answer but is able to carry out an action on our behalf. I think I see that radically changing many aspects of society. And then finally, sort of longer term, geopolitically, I think the question of if AI is going to become commoditized in the way that people seem to think it is, then that suggests that electricity, once again, becomes the precious resource and cheap access to electricity. And what does that mean in terms of distribution of data centers? What does that mean in terms of energy policy and climate change and all of these sort of knock-on effects?
Would you envision removing or minimizing the role of the human in the loop in case of those strategic operational planning decisions for speed purposes? What's your position on that?
So I think we have a pretty clear, legal and ethical basis for ensuring that, what we call commander's intent is always involved. That being said, when you look at, trying to operate in, communications denied environments, the entire point of autonomy in that situation is a system being able to take action on its own. And so I actually think that the human in the loop becomes a really dangerous misnomer, and actually could make a system, either defeat the point of it or make it way less safe. And I think we should actually confront the real possibility that there are certain conflict scenarios in which we don't want a human in the loop. And then what does that mean in terms of the ethical boundaries that we build into that system?
Thank you. Heather?
Yeah, let me just kind of first begin by reflecting on the fact that we have no idea what 10 years out looks like. And that's true of every technology we've ever invented or harnessed. I remember a paper I read about when electricity was harnessed, and people thought warfare would change because suddenly we would have weapons where we zap people on the field. This is like the late 1800s. And actually, that is not how it changed warfare. It changed warfare by improving supply chains, right? And so our first hypothesis about how we use technology is never actually how we end up harnessing it for kind of real effectiveness. So that's number one. Number two, I think we are going to have massive improvements in pharmaceuticals, material science. We're already using it to help optimize power grids. Google's got a partnership with many governments to do flood prediction, big topic here in Poland at the moment. These things will dramatically improve the lives of people. And also, we will get to learn more about the technology over the next 10 years. I'm going to disagree with my colleague and say societies will learn they want a human in the loop on some things. And yes, you may have some micro decisions along the way, but for strategic, kind of irreversible things, we will have humans in the loop. That will become a norm, in my view. And then finally, and the thing that we never talk about is, how is AI going to change us? And I already see it to some extent in the classroom. I talk to professors. Professors are going back to oral exams. Does the student really know what they're learning? In the Bay Area, California, USA, where I live, there are now whole groups of people so that you can make friends. We've spent so much of our time electronics in our lives and trying to automate our lives. Actually, people want the human connection back. And I think that may change. But I do think we're going to get 50 years, 2050, not 50 years from now, but in 2050, I think we will have increasingly autonomous computing systems, self-healing systems, self-defending systems. But I don't think we're going to let the computers make many more strategic decisions than that.
Thank you so much, Heather. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so we won't have time to pose questions from the audience, but we'll have another panel in the afternoon, so please join us back for that on AI. You can ask your questions then. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you, Biljana, for moderating this session. Great insights into how the world is changing with artificial intelligence, what it means for security, what it means for the economy, what it means for our daily lives. I think a subject that we'll be hearing more and more about, and one that's going to be influencing every area of our lives, and certainly areas so important for democratic resilience. Since we are in the area of technology and its intersection with democracy and the resilience of societies, I have a great pleasure to invite you to listen to remarks by the Deputy Prime Minister of Poland and the Minister for Digital Affairs, Mr. Krzysztof Gawkowski. Mr. Prime Minister, please join us on stage.
Szanowni Państwo, to olbrzymi zaszczyt występować dzisiaj na Warsaw Security Forum, imprezie, która swoją rangą pokazuje, jak ważne dla Polski, polskich instytucji jest bezpieczeństwo, wielowymiarowe bezpieczeństwo. Mój obszar odpowiedzialności w ramach rządu to cyberbezpieczeństwo i o tym chciałbym dzisiaj więcej powiedzieć.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me today to speak at the Warsaw Security Forum. This is a very important event for Poland, and indeed the topic of our discussion today, and something I'm going to refer to, is cyber security and the significance of it for our societies.
Współcześnie nie ma możliwości dobrego i szybkiego rozwoju państwa bez zagwarantowania jego obywatelom dostępu do nowych technologii, bezpieczeństwa w cyfrowym świecie, cyfrowej komunikacji z administracją czy podstawowych umiejętności cyfrowych.
Today it would be impossible for a country to develop efficiently and well without guaranteeing its citizens access to modern technology, security in the digital world, as well as digital communication with public administration or basic digital skills.
Te wyzwania wymagają przemyślanego, spójnego i kompleksowego podejścia i takie kompleksowe podejście chcemy w Ministerstwie Cyfryzacji zaproponować, pracy nad całościową strategią rozwoju cyfrowego, która będzie sięgała do 2035 roku.
And that is exactly the challenge that requires thoughtful, coherent and comprehensive approach. This is the approach that we have undertaken at the Ministry for Digital Affairs, and this is how we are proceeding to the development of the digital development strategy to be in place until 2039.
W obszarze cyberbezpieczeństwa jest również zapewnić wszystkie kluczowe elementy rozwoju państwa, które sięgają i technologii przełomowych, i komputerów kwantowych, i sztucznej inteligencji.
It is extremely important to provide for key digital competencies within the state so as to provide for the adequate use of such technologies in providing for environment, artificial intelligence and for cybersecurity issues.
Chcę Państwa zapewnić, że Ministerstwo Cyfryzacji pracuje nad zapewnieniem tego, żeby żaden potencjał, ani ludzki, ani naukowy, ani biznesowy z Polski nie wyjeżdżał i zrobi wszystko, że nawet jak się pojawiają jakieś błędy w strategii cyfrowej państwa, w takim myśleniu o nauce, to właśnie Ministerstwo Cyfryzacji ma być tym hubem, który to wszystko naprawi i wyprowadzi na prostą.
The Ministry for Digital Affairs is taking due care that none of the human intellectual potential leaves the country. Sometimes mistakes do happen with a digital strategy, and that is why the Ministry for Digital Affairs is there to serve as a certain hub that will couple all of these competencies together.
Dlatego, myśląc o rozwoju cyfrowym państwa, ochrona przed cyberzagrożeniami jest kluczowym wyzwaniem dla naszego kraju i regionu.
And that is why, as we're thinking about cybersecurity of this region, we need to provide for the adequate level of security both in the state and in this region.
Po pierwsze, mamy świadomość, że na rozwój cyberbezpieczeństwa potrzebne są pieniądze, zarówno w tych instytucjach, które odpowiadają za bezpieczeństwo państwa po stronie publicznej, jak i w kooperujących firmach, które też powinny pamiętać, wiedzieć i mieć świadomość, że państwo pomaga.
First and foremost, we need financing, and thus public finances is there to be assured, but also we need to have a certain level of awareness with the companies that they would need to have and they shall have access to such financing as it is in place and available.
W ramach wzmacniania cyberodporności państwa przeznaczymy w najbliższych 2 latach ponad 3 miliardy złotych tylko i wyłącznie na inwestycje i w obszarze samorządu, i w obszarze państwa.
Thus, for instance, over the span of the next 2 years, we are going to earmark 3 billion Polish zlotys for the development of cybersecurity matters, both at the state level, but also the level of local authorities.
Wspólnie z Bankiem Gospodarstwa Krajowego na lata 2025-2026 zaprojektowaliśmy narzędzia sięgające 2,8 miliarda złotych na wsparcie dla firm w zakresie transformacji cyfrowej.
As far as digital transformation is concerned, in this case, in cooperation with the BJK Bank, we have developed a plan, a budgeted at the level of 2.8 billion Polish zlotys for the periods 2025-2026, so as to boost the development of cybersecurity at the corporate level.
A dopełnieniem tego ma być kilkaset milionów złotych, które w 2025 i 2026 roku zostaną wydane na kompetencje cyfrowe i higienę cyfrową, która ma też swoje ważne zadanie przygotowania tej społecznej tkanki na zagrożenia w cyberprzestrzeni.
Moreover, millions shall be spent in the period 2025-2026 for the development of digital competencies and digital hygiene within the society so as to raise the level of awareness.
Drugi ważny aspekt myślenia o spójnej roli państwa w ochronie obywateli to legislacja. I tutaj tym najważniejszym elementem z perspektywy bezpieczeństwa w cyberprzestrzeni jest przygotowana przez nas nowelizacja Krajowego Systemu Cyberbezpieczeństwa, która już w najbliższych dniach zostanie w pełni przedstawiona i poddana międzyresortowym konsultacjom rządowym.
As for the legislative activities, we're working on the national cybersecurity system. That system is to be demonstrated in the nearest future and will be subject to the interministerial discussions.
W tej przestrzeni bardzo ważne jest to, że chcemy żeby partnerzy na rynku europejskim, światowym wiedzieli, że będziemy stawiali i chcemy w przyszłości bardzo mocno stawiać na zaufanych partnerów, na to, żeby dostawcy wysokiego ryzyka mieli świadomość, że Polska chce budować swoją cybertarczę nie tylko poprzez finanse, ale również przez dobrą legislację.
And in this case, it is important to send a very clear message to our both European and global partners that we are betting on and shall be betting on developing trust-based relations with our partners. This is particularly important in the case of high-risk vendors, and therefore all our partners should know that we will be contributing to this cause both financially but also on the legislative level.
Dlatego trzecim ważnym elementem dopełnienia tej tkanki cyberbezpieczeństwa jest przygotowanie przez nas strategii bezpieczeństwa w cyberprzestrzeni. Ta strategia cyberbezpieczeństwa RP chcemy, żeby została przedstawiona do konsultacji jeszcze w 2024 roku.
The third element of our activities is the development of the cyberspace strategy. And this strategy is to be hammered out still this year, and we would like this strategy to be discussed still in 2024.
Chcemy wyprzedzać przyszłość, współpracując z naszymi partnerami z Unii Europejskiej i NATO, ale też budując coraz mocniejszy sojusz w relacjach transatlantyckich.
We're looking forward to the future, and hence we are enhancing our cooperation with our EU partners, NATO partners, and we are enhancing the transatlantic link.
Dlatego jednym z elementów strategii w tym długofalowym horyzoncie będzie odporność polskich instytucji działających w cyberprzestrzeni, która ma zwiększyć ochronę danych w sektorze publicznym, wojskowym i prywatnym.
And that is why we are working on increasing the resilience of the Polish society, both in the public, military and legislative spheres.
Dlatego mocno skupiamy się na budowaniu dobrych relacji z naszymi partnerami i sąsiadami, w tym z tymi, którzy zostali bestialsko zaatakowani przez Rosję w 2022 roku. Mówię oczywiście o Ukrainie.
And that is why we are building our partnership relations with our neighbors, also with the neighbor who was brutally attacked by Russia in 2022. Thus, we are scaling up our cooperation with Ukraine.
Polska cyberbezpieczeństwo traktuje jako pewną domenę współpracy, dlatego bardzo dużą rolę przykładamy też do polskiej prezydencji, która zaczyna się w styczniu 2025.
Cybersecurity is a major domain of cooperation for Poland, and hence this is going to be a major focal point during the Polish presidency in the European Union that is due to start in January next year.
Przewodnictwo w Radzie Unii Europejskiej to znakomita okazja, żeby pokazywać priorytety państwa w różnych domenach dotyczących jego rozwoju.
A presidency in the Council of the European Union is a great opportunity to show different priorities and domains of high significance for a given country and the way it is planning to work in the region.
I dlatego nieprzypadkowo priorytetem polskiej prezydencji w obszarze cyfrowym będzie cyberbezpieczeństwo.
Hence, it is not a coincidence that cybersecurity is going to be one of the priority topics for the Polish presidency.
Chcemy, żeby Unia Europejska skupiła się na kierunku łączenia potencjałów obszaru militarnego i cywilnego na rzecz cyberbezpieczeństwa.
We are keen on addressing the focus of the European Union on coupling the military and civilian potential in the realm of cybersecurity.
Chcemy, żeby w ciągu najbliższych 6 miesięcy prezydencji Polska była liderem, jeżeli chodzi o zakończenie procesów opisanych, jeżeli chodzi o incydenty dużej skali.
And that is why Poland intends on being a leading country over the next period of 6 months, that is during the presidency, on working on the processes that relate to high-risk incidents.
Będziemy również wskazywali na konieczność pogłębienia dyskusji na poziomie europejskim dotyczących celów związanych z rozwojem sieci 6G.
Moreover, we are going to lead discussions on the development of the 6G network in the future.
Uważamy, że cyfrowa dyplomacja jest tak samo ważna jak ta dyplomacja, która kształtuje losy państw w Europie i na świecie. Dlatego będziemy do niej bardzo dużą wagę przykładali w najbliższych miesiącach.
We do believe that digital diplomacy is equally important as the diplomacy that is so much influential for countries and regions all over the world. And that is why we're going to focus on digital diplomacy during our presidency as well.
Chcemy, żeby obszary sztucznej inteligencji, komputerów kwantowych, technologii przełomowych stanowiły istotny element myślenia o cyberbezpieczeństwie i dlatego z perspektywy Ministerstwa Cyfryzacji będą one stawały się kluczowe.
We also do believe that artificial intelligence, quantum computing and disruptive technologies are going to play an ever-increasing role in cybersecurity matters, and that is why we're going to focus on them as well.
I na koniec chciałem powiedzieć, że jestem niezmiernie dumny ze służb i instytucji państwa, które dzisiaj pracują w Polsce nad cyberbezpieczeństwem, bo przez znakomitych ekspertów i światowych, i europejskich są uznawane za jedne z najlepszych, w pierwszej piątce najlepszych na świecie.
To conclude, I would like to say that I'm very proud of the Polish services that are working on enhancing our cybersecurity. As for our experts, they are considered to be the part of the top 5 best countries that boast of the best cybersecurity experts in the world.
Cyfryzacja i cyberbezpieczeństwo powinno w każdym państwie traktowane być priorytetowo.
Digitalization and cybersecurity should be treated as high priority matters in any country.
Takie zadania stawia sobie też polska administracja.
And that is exactly the task faced by the Polish administration.
Jesteśmy dzisiaj w miejscu przełomowym i kluczowym, bo wojny na świecie wskazują, że w cyberprzestrzeni będzie coraz więcej zagrożeń.
Today we are at a very important junction, and that is of key significance because wars in the today's world are indicative of that. There will be many more things happening in cyberspace.
Nikt nie zapewni bezpieczeństwa społecznego obywatelom Europy i świata, jeżeli w pierwszym rzędzie zapewnienia bezpieczeństwa nie będzie stało cyberbezpieczeństwo.
And no one will be capable of providing European citizens and citizens of the world with security if cyber security matters are not attended to.
Chciałbym, żeby to przesłanie zostało dzisiaj razem z Państwem. Serdecznie dziękuję za zaproszenie.
And I would like this message to stay with you over today's discussions. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister, for those remarks. I think it was extremely important for us to hear about the plans of Poland in the digital domain. Very glad to hear that there are so ambitious plans regarding both strengthening the digital area, our cybersecurity capabilities, and working in cooperation in other partners in the EU. And here, of course, our presidency in the Council of the European Union in the first half of 2025 will be a very important time. Ladies and gentlemen, we will move to the next session, a discussion about cognitive warfare, defending our minds and impacting behavior of our adversaries. Sounds absolutely fascinating, and it will be moderated by Federica D'Alessandra, who is the Deputy Director of the University of Oxford's Institute of Ethics, Law and Armed Conflict in the UK. Federica, please join us on stage. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. As you've heard, my name is Federica D'Alessandra, and I have the pleasure of moderating this next discussion on cognitive warfare, defending our minds, and impacting the behavior of adversaries. we will have the immense honor of entering into this discussion with Dr. Magnus Huth, Director General of the Swedish Psychological Defense Agency, who also holds a PhD from Stockholm University and has been for a long time engaging in security policy in the Cold War and post-Cold War era. In an era of rampant online disinformation and propaganda, combined with the rapid advancement of digital and cyber technologies, cognitive warfare offers our adversaries a tool to achieve significant strategic outcomes while bypassing traditional battlefields. This raises critical questions about how the transatlantic alliance, and of course domestically within our own countries, we can adapt. And we have a lot to cover in a very short amount of time, so we'll just dive right in with the first question. Magnus, first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let me just ask you, what trends do you currently observe in the information landscape, and more specifically regarding cognitive operations against European societies? What's the ultimate goal of these activities, and how effective are they in improving the current information environment?
Well, thank you, Federica. Quite a few questions in there, I think. First of all, the terminology. We speak of cognitive warfare here. We could speak of information warfare, psychological warfare, which is the foundation why we have a psychological defense agency, because we acknowledged back in the 1940s that we might be subjected to psychological warfare. If you are seeing that, you need a psychological defense, right? So that's why we established Psychological Defense Agency back in the 1950s. In the European Union, we use the term FIMI, Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference, and it's basically the same thing, so cognitive warfare, information warfare. And this is something that is being used constantly, 24/7, to address how we are perceiving reality, how we are forming our decisions to influence that. And this is something we need to address in order to uphold our democracies and our independent decision-making, really. Election interference is something that we have experienced a lot, I think. It has been acknowledged at least since 2016, but this is an old game that has been used all through the ages, really. The things that have been changing, obviously, is the technological, what can be done, actually. And the introduction of the internet, smartphones, social media, and now generative AI has completely changed what can be done, actually. And the tempo, the speed has enhanced so fast. It's now so much easier to spread this information to broad target groups. So the ultimate goal, you asked, I would say world domination. I mean, China is looking at 2049. Russia is speaking about the multipolar world, which actually means that smaller nations shouldn't be bothered, really, shouldn't have any influence at all. And this is what we are seeing in the ongoing war against Ukraine. They are trying to establish interest spheres. And in order to do that, they use information warfare to legitimize the war, both to their own public, but also to the rest of the world, trying to say that, for instance, NATO is the aggressor here. Another thing we have not been talking so much about, an overlooked field, I think, is the gaming world. The gaming world is huge. I think there are 3 billion people around the world playing games at a regular basis. And this is an understudied area, really, when we're talking about disinformation. There are so many ways an aggressor can use gaming as an influence tool. For instance, we see that in how Russia is doing it in games like African Dawn, where you basically play to oust France from influence and pushing Russian influence. We see it in how you can play historical war games in order to rewrite history or help the rewriting of history. We see it in how you can play the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. You've raised so many important points that we'll definitely circle back to. And certainly I'm grateful that you mentioned the gaming industry, because as you said, psychological warfare, information warfare is not necessarily something new, but the way in which it is being, prosecuted, the ways in which, to the means and the technologies that we have today, and the speed especially, makes it really challenging to adapt and to control. So I guess on the back of that question, I'd like to ask you, so what really can we do as a society, as democracies in particular, to assist in bolstering our societal resilience and really build a system that is conceived to, push back and to address such cognitive warfare efforts? And if I can just ask a second question, because I do have that as a bad habit of just bundling two together, what can the, other NATO allies, the alliance as a whole, or just European partners and societies learn from the experience of Swedish society, and specifically through the prism of the mandates of your agency?
Well, first of all, we are constantly monitoring what foreign adversaries are doing to Sweden or Swedish interests. We need to know what themes they are playing, what narratives they are using, so we can, build something to counter them. Our other task is to build long-term resilience within the Swedish population, and that we do with the training courses. We have a curriculum which you can build upon, basic course, advanced course, etc. We have exercises where we train people in how to see through disinformation and cognitive warfare. So we are currently touring around Sweden and giving these exercises to the 6 regional boards responsible for total defense in Sweden. So we are walking through them to reach municipalities, and that way also to reach out to the whole population. We have a whole of society approach, because in our mandate it says we need to enhance preparedness and readiness within the whole population. I mean, we can't, educate each one. We need to work through others. Civil society is, of course, very important. I think a democratic and resilient civil society is one of the foundations for our democracy. So we are working closely with some NGOs and also some that are focusing on young people, because we need to work with the young. Those are the ones who possibly we go into military training. We need to enhance the knowledge of how the modern threat landscape looks like. Why are we even having a defense? Who is threatening us? What are they doing to us? We are funding research, which I think is a very good way in enhancing knowledge. Currently, since last year, we have a research institute at Lund University, the Psychological Defense Research Institute, which we are funding, and they are doing great work there. And we also have annual conferences, academic conference on psychological defense. We bring together people from academia to discuss in panels and seminars, both on the resilience side, but also on the threat assessment side.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's immensely insightful, and actually I'm very grateful that you've highlighted the approach, Sweden's approach as a whole society approach, and obviously you've highlighted the importance of partnering with civil society organizations, with the academy, and so in, I guess, rounding up the picture, what opportunities and challenges do you see when it comes to cooperating and partnering with private sector actors in addressing some of these challenges? I'll just leave it at that for now.
Well, we need to have a dialogue with the big tech companies, and that we have. I mean, Microsoft and Google are doing great things, but then again, Google is one of there are companies, they have their agenda, of course, but we need to have dialogues with them, and also others, of course. So we are using the technological tools that are offered by the private sector, not only these big companies, but others, of course. We are a small government agency. We cannot develop, the technological analytical tools. We are entering a world where AI will have a greater importance, both as a threat, but also as a tool for us to enhance our analytical capabilities. And this is something that we need to evolve and constantly learn and develop.
Great, fantastic, thank you. I would ask you about something obviously related, but just on a slightly different note, which is what's your take on, I guess, the pros and cons of developing, for democratic societies, of developing offensive cognitive capabilities against hostile actors? What type of capabilities would be appropriate, but also, how much does context matter, right? Because, I guess it's one thing to think about societies that are actively at war, and it's another thing to think about societies that are not at war, right? So Sweden is not at war currently, so maybe the tools you deploy and your approach by, obviously differ from, say, a society like Ukraine, which is in an active conflict. So could you enlighten us on that?
Of course. We're a psychological defense agency, and these are defense measures that we're talking about. But I often talk about the offensive dimension of psychological defense, and we have in our remit from the Swedish government to be able to, in case of war or danger of war, to be able to suggest to the Swedish government measures to be taken to reduce an attacker's intention or capability to attack Sweden in the information domain. So this is something that we are assigned to do in danger of war or in war, actually. And so this is something we need to prepare in peacetime. We need to learn how could you address these issues. And of course, you mentioned Ukraine. They are fighting a real war at the present. And we are supporting Ukraine. Our agency has been there and performed exercises and things like that. And we are also learning a lot from how the Ukrainians are fighting this war, this information war that's going on right now. So this is something that we need to bring into our how we build up this capability. But let me be clear, this is something that the Swedish government owns. This is not something that we perform on our own, and it's only in times of danger of war or war. And of course, we also always need to maintain and uphold the humanitarian laws, international laws. We should not attack a civilian population. But could we possibly influence how decision makers are thinking? Could we influence the morale of fighting troops attacking Sweden? Could we influence the way people perceive legitimacy in attacking Sweden? Mm-hmm. That's something that we could think of.
Yeah, that's extremely important. Thank you for highlighting the importance of humanitarian law rules during wartime and how that intersects actually with these operations. Because of course, beyond the content and disinformation itself, that could be evidence in their own account of violations of IHL, but actually the very ways in which certain platforms are used can also in themselves constitute violations of international humanitarian law. We have about 4 minutes, so that's enough time for one last question, and I appreciate that you might not be able to speak this in your official capacity, but you mentioned earlier that, as part of the threat assessment within, sort of NATO information landscape, so what are your thoughts on how can a positive image of NATO first and foremost, but maybe the West more generally, be promoted not only among hostile societies, but also in regions that remain neutral in global competition?
Well, I think it has to do with we need to be as transparent as possible. We are a defense agency working in the field of information. We need to be very transparent in how we work. We need to always uphold our democratic values and fight for them, stand up for them. And I see we need to get away from this image of NATO as being, that is portrayed in some circles as being an offensive military alliance. NATO is a defense alliance, and that we need to be clear about. And I think it's quite obvious that both NATO and the European Union has been very successful in maintaining peace in Europe since 1945. If you disregard the civil war in Yugoslavia and some of the cases where the Soviet Union invaded their own allies, there has been peace between countries that has been fighting forever, basically. So if you look back in history, we have constant wars. World War II, World War I, the Napoleonic Wars, the 30 Years' War, the 100 Years' War. Now we have stability in Europe, and that is very good. And I think that Sweden entering NATO also brings stability. Now it's very clear where Sweden stands. So I think we need to always be clear on this in all our communications, that these are two institutions that are maintaining peace, bringing stability. These are unions that you want to belong to, be part of.
Absolutely, but I guess it's not just a matter of sort of pushing back against narratives that are being, put out and forward by hostile actors. But maybe there is an element in there of also being more proactive about, I don't want to say aggressive, but at least proactive in putting out our own narratives, right? Like that can be part of the same sort of other side of the same coin. But I guess just in the last minute and 30 seconds before we have to break, you mentioned, again, the gaming industry. I'm really fascinated by this because, as you say, like it's a very underdeveloped, under-researched area. So just very briefly, if you can tell us, sort of what are you seeing in that space? How does it differ from, other, technologies or platforms? And maybe one or two ideas for, where some research should actually be focused moving forward.
Yeah, well, two brief points there. We have actually produced or financed a research report on how gaming is being used. It can be downloaded from our website, mpf.se. It's in English. And it's been done by Lund University. And I think they have identified 40 different ways you can manipulate information in gaming. The other thing is that we're also supporting a research project in Uppsala University, the oldest university in Sweden. They are looking into how can you use gaming as a pedagogical tool in order to enhance critical thinking, in order to learn more how you can identify disinformation and how you can possibly counter it. So I think it goes both ways.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, this is all the time that we have. You have taken us through a tour de force, and this has been extremely fascinating. So I really want to thank you for your time, and I hope that our audience has enjoyed your insight as much as I have. Please join me in giving Magnus a round warm of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Federica, for a very interesting conversation. Thank you for moderating it. Ladies and gentlemen, we will move to the next part of our democratic resilience track, which will be a presentation from a partner of the Warsaw Security Forum, a representative of SAB. Jenny Gardner will join us, who's a senior director for future capabilities at SAB, delivering her remarks. And I've got a glimpse that we're going to look outside into the outer space and look into some very future and forward-looking initiatives. So I'm very eager to hear that. Please, let's give a round of applause. And Jenny, please join us on the stage.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am so happy to be here today to speak to this very extraordinary audience. My name is Jenny Gardner, and I work with future capabilities as a senior director at SAB. I asked one of the Swedish astronauts about his favorite joke. truth to be told, I've sent him a couple of jokes and he picked one. I'm sure he has a much better sense of humor than this. But this was the joke he picked. What does Earth say to tease other planets? You guys have no life. And I think this particular joke is a proper scene setter for what I'm going to talk about today. Space for a sustainable and resilient future. We have a brilliant blue planet full of life. And it's an our stewardship. So I'm going to talk about 4 things today. I'm going to talk about technology and innovation. I'm going to talk about sustainability. I'm going to talk about space, and then I'm going to wrap it up with an example of just this. But first, a couple of words about Saab. So Saab was founded in 1937 to develop and manufacture combat aircraft and to provide Sweden with a strong defense during very uncertain geopolitical times. Saab is today a leading defense and security company. We have around 24,000 staff. We work with technology areas, and you see a couple of those, or actually you see all of them here on the screen. And you also see some of our flagship products, like, for example, the fighter jet Gripen. We at Saab, we also work with commercial business. So we do sell, for example, digital control towers for air traffic control, command and control systems, and much, much more. Today, I will specifically focus on how we work with investments. Because Saab does spend around 24% of the turnover in R&D. So I want to make my first point just around this, and that is the importance of technology development. R&D is the building block for the future. And specifically, if you talk about creative destruction, the process of where new innovation replaces old innovation, this is the best way really to work with that type of process and to keep competitive. That is to work with R&D and innovation. And economic growth built on innovation is also a very important way of safeguarding stability in the world and resilience. So by investing in tomorrow, we build a better future world. And with our heritage from the 1930s, that our mission then is very deeply rooted, and that is to keep societies and people safe. So now to my second point, and that's about sustainability. The importance of sustainability and to kind of create a resilient world is, of course, I think in everybody's mind at the moment. And to be clear, we believe that global challenges such as climate change, human rights, health, and inequality can only be fully addressed if societies are safe and resilient. So we want to contribute to sustainable development via business practice that is responsible or are responsible, but we also want to work with customers and partners on sustainable innovation. We have mapped our company and seen where can we have the greatest impact when it comes to sustainable development, to find synergies between Saab's business plan and the UN sustainability goals. We also worked with science-based targets initiatives, and they have improved, the organization SBTi has approved our emission reduction targets, making Saab the first major defense and security company to receive an approval, which means that we are aligned with the Paris Agreement. We also work with, for example, committing, and we have committed to the UN's Race to Zero campaign. And then I want to go to my third point, and that's space. So space has always been somewhat of a challenge for us humans. We started looking up at the stars. We've been working with astronomy. The space race between the US and the USSR, of course, drove a lot of development. We had the Apollo program, the first space shuttle, the collaboration on the International Space Station, And today we have new space where in kind of commercial industry actually are able to provide a lot of value when it comes to space development. And within defense, we see a special kind of interest around SDA, and SDA, Space Domain Awareness, that's basically looking up in the sky to see what's above us. ISR, that's the opposite, using satellites to look down and understand what's happening below on Earth. SATCOM, putting communication equipment, payloads on satellites and using that for communication. And PNT, which is position, navigation, and timing, where the GPS, of course, is the most well-known application or system for that. And as a defense and security company, we see that not only from a defense perspective, but from a commercial perspective, there is going to be a lot of value built. So the World Economic Forum and McKinsey has basically kind of said in April this year that the space economy will soar from 630 billion to 1.8 trillion by 2035. So the value is just going to increase. And at Saab, we focus on how to enhance our systems through space capabilities to the benefit for our customers. And that can, for example, be working with space data for ISR, awareness for our customers. We launched a satellite, Ymir-1, last year, and our former chief test pilot, now chief innovation officer, Marcus Wandt, became the latest Swedish ESA astronaut this year. And a note about Poland here, the country recently increased both its engagement and contribution with ESA to support the Polish space sector. So a shout out to Poland. Would very much would be delighted to explore collaboration around space from Saab's perspective. So now we're going to, I talked about innovation, I talked about sustainability, and I talked about space. So now I'm going to talk about a practical example of this. And this is about our kind of satellite Ymir-1. So let's just talk about AIS. That is Automatic Identification System. It exists today all around in the maritime world. It's transponders, basically, that says, I am here to avoid a collision. So it's a system for safety in the maritime world. We are now working with the next generation of AIS called VDES, VHF Data Exchange System. And there you don't only transmit your position, you can actually communicate. We recently launched Ymir-1, a satellite with a payload with a VDES transponder with SpaceX Falcon 9 in November last year. And it's an in-orbit demonstration. So basically we're using it as a prototype, R&D. Not the transponder, but actually putting it on a satellite. And one satellite will not make a system, but this is a first step in the direction of making sure that we can send a whole system, many satellites up and make a constellation. And here you see, this is a superhighways of the sea today. This is actually a picture from Ymir-1. It's kind of transponder on board in September 2024. And this is AIS. So you now see all those green dots. That's our merchant ships, navy ships, yachts, and aids to navigation, like, for example, fish farms. And this is really interesting from the perspective that we today see where they are, but the next step with VDES will be to actually have all of these ships communicating with each other. So it will be quite a capability enhancement. And an important voting will happen next year, spring 2025, at the UN IMO, to also bring in VDES, this new technology, into the fold of regulations. And this will create a global, affordable, and secure communication system that can optimize shipping routes and fuel to reduce energy consumption and emissions. And it will create greater efficiency and safety in the maritime industry, supporting further economic growth. And here you see how we mapped out this specific technology towards the UN Sustainability Development Goals. But we have just scratched the surface. This is one of many ways that Saab is working on to contribute for a more sustainable and resilient future. Next session in this room will be about national infrastructure for societies resilient, and this is an excellent example of how we can build a stronger and more resilient maritime infrastructure. So I'd like to thank you for your time and go back to the joke in the beginning. What does Earth say to tease other planets? You guys have no life. Let's make sure that we excel in the stewardship of this planet, of this life. Let's together work on safeguarding people and societies, and let's use tech and sustainability-oriented innovation to explore new frontiers and solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those remarks. I must say I'm personally extremely excited about this new AIS system. Being an avid sailor, this will be absolutely fantastic. And the accessibility for that, well, kudos to Saab. And very interesting to hear about those developments. So again, we're very happy to have such a partner here at the Warsaw Security Forum. Jenny, thank you again for your remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll move to the next discussion, which will be a panel discussion on the military-civilian divide. Very interesting. The role of critical infrastructure in it for society's resilience. And to moderate this panel, I'd like to invite Benjamin L. Schmidt, who's a senior fellow at the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Pennsylvania in the US. Benjamin, please join us on stage.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Warsaw Security Forum and our panel on critical infrastructure protection. And I couldn't be more excited to moderate this panel, which we have some of the leading minds and experts and former officials working on these issues. And I'll just do a quick introduction. To my left is Major General Johan Pekari, the Chief of the Directorate of Strategic Plans and Policy at the Swedish Armed Forces in Sweden. Next, we have CEO Jaroslav Grudzinski at NASK of Poland, which is a cyber firm. And then last but not least, we have Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, Executive Director of the Cyberspace Solarium Commission in the United States. And I think I'll just start by saying we are in a new era of critical infrastructure protection, but also resilience. We have seen, since Russia's large-scale invasion of Ukraine, an increasing number of cyber attacks, but also physical infrastructure attacks against energy and critical infrastructure. I think we could easily say that this started on January 7th, 2022, when a Russian fishing trawler, the Melkart 5, was viewed on AIS passing over a critical subsea telecommunications cable from the Svalsat facility, the Svalbard commercial satellite infrastructure station, and cutting that cable that would prove important to the Ukrainian defense, because commercial satellite data, of course, from both communications as well as geospatial imagery became very important for Ukraine in the coming weeks after that happened, of course, with Russia's large-scale invasion happening just a month later. We've flashed forward, we've seen the Nord Stream gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea be destroyed. We've seen the Baltic Connector pipeline between Finland and Estonia be destroyed. We have seen cyber attacks, again, at GRU hiring locals and folks from Belarus, from Ukraine, from Poland, etc., to carry out these low-scale sabotage attacks and cyber attacks across the EU and across NATO territory. And so my question I'll ask later on is about what NATO can do to respond. But first, I want to pass this along and have rapid reactions to where we are now, and is this an unprecedented scale that we're seeing, or is this just something that we need to take as the new normal? first to you.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for inviting me here today. And I think I should begin with saying that I'm also the cyber commander in Sweden. So if I lean towards that field, please bear with me. I think we are all familiar with modern society's dependence on critical infrastructure, and when looking forward, we will get even more dependent as we have the digital transformation and so on. The armed forces isn't any different. We are also dependent on some of the critical infrastructure, of course. And more generally put, we are dependent on a functioning society as a whole. Consequently, what is critical for society is also critical for the armed forces. However, the solution is not that the armed forces is responsible for the protection of all the critical infrastructure and the vulnerabilities. That would simply not be possible. Instead, we as a society must be resilient and forestall the potential impact from any attack, be it thanks to physical protection, redundancy, or by a psychological strong society. A resilient society is probably also the best deterrence by denial. Creating resilience in society demands collaboration, and this is not at least important for us in Sweden, since we have very strong agencies with independent responsibilities. And as a result, our civil defense and our civil preparedness rely a lot on collaboration between all sectors, including the private sector. However, resilience cannot be developed cross-government only. We need to do it as well, cross-border as well. Underwater cables, as you mentioned, between nations is a good example of that. They are between Sweden and Finland, for example. They pass international waters as well. So therefore, institutions like the European Union, like NATO, have huge responsibilities here and important roles as well. In conclusion then, what is the role of the armed forces in this? I think we can and will protect some of the critical infrastructure, but we will never be able to do it, all of them, and we will not be able to do it always. So what we really can provide is probably information about the threat, about the challenges, and make sure that all the society has all the information they need and the correct situational awareness, including our international partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Yaroslav?
So I agree that firstly, it's not only military role for securing of critical infrastructure. The definition, in general, the definition of the critical infrastructure is broader than years ago. Yes, so now in European Union we have many sectors described as critical. So like energy, water supply, of course, banks infrastructure, cybersecurity infrastructure, and what is, from our perspective, the most important thing is, I think, good planning, good cooperation between military and civilian entities, and this is the key to the success. And of course, the next complicated thing is chain of supply. Yeah, chain of supplies is very complicated, and it's also not only a national issue. Yes, it's an international issue, not only European issue. When we say about the NATO, I think that transatlantic cooperation and planning is a crucial thing, and this I think we have to build between us each year, because we have to develop also the new elements, for example, the artificial intelligence, yes, as the key element for the cybersecurity, and not only cybersecurity, of course, for any kind of security.
Great, thank you. Rear Admiral Montgomery, please.
Well, thanks, and I agree with what both my co-panelists have said, and I want to thank the Warsaw Security Forum for bringing up this issue. I think it's an important one. I'll say bluntly, from a critical infrastructure point of view, there's three areas that are lines of effort that are under attack. The first is national security, The second's economic productivity. The third's public health and safety. We have to defend all of them, and that's why it's not just the military. But picking up on the national security one, this is incredibly challenging for us because it's the rail, aviation, and port systems critical to the military to move supplies, move equipment, move troops, both from across the Atlantic, but also within Europe, but predominantly owned and operated by private sector companies. And we know our adversaries understand the vulnerability there. In the United States, we've recently released highly classified information about something called Volt Typhoon, a Chinese attempt to put malicious payloads in our infrastructures, in our ports, aviation, rail, electrical power, and water. And this was not espionage. It was not criminal activity. It's what you call operational preparation of the battlefield. It was a warlike action put in there. I promise you, the Russians have done the same stuff in Western Europe, and they've done this in the United States as well. We just have chose not to release it yet. This is important because we're going to have to very rapidly do an assessment, a prioritization, and then an action effort to identify and remove this malware from the systems to ensure that we can have a rapid movement of forces across the Atlantic and through Western to Eastern Europe during a crisis or contingency. So a very important issue, one we need to tackle with some level of priority and immediacy.
Well, thank you. I'd like to broaden this out a little.